You're standing in your kitchen at 11:43 p.m. wearing yesterday's hoodie, staring at your banking app while pasta water boils over on the stove. Your paycheck hit this morning and somehow it already feels spent. Rent pulled first, insurance next, then the credit card auto pay you forgot about. You do the weird little mental shuffle where you move money from savings to checking, then tell yourself you'll move it back next week like that counts as a plan. Your group chat lights up about a weekend trip, and before you even open it, you're already thinking of excuses. Then you see someone your age online talking about making $230,000 a year, and suddenly one question starts crawling around your head. What should your salary actually be by now? Because the stress isn't just the money. It's the constant calculation. It's standing in a grocery store pretending to compare brands when you're really checking which cereal won't overdraft your account. It's hearing a weird sound in your car and instantly feeling your chest tighten because one repair could erase 3 months of progress. It's saying, I'm slammed with work, when friends invite you out because the truth feels embarrassing. Sound familiar? And the worst part is how invisible this kind of stress is. You can still look normal while everything underneath feels unstable. You go to work, you answer emails, you laugh at meetings. Then you sit in traffic wondering how people are buying homes, taking vacations, having kids, and still somehow breathing normally. According to Federal Reserve data, 37% of Americans couldn't comfortably cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing or selling something. That number sounds impossible until your dentist casually says the words, root canal. Your car could break down. Your laptop might die. You could lose your job. And suddenly, your entire life feels like pushing a boulder uphill that rolls backward every single night while you sleep. That's why this cycle feels impossible to escape. You're trying to build a future while your present keeps demanding ransom payments. Most financial advice completely screws this up. It tells you there's a magical salary number where stress disappears. Make 6 figures, hit $200,000. Grind harder, negotiate more aggressively, move industries. And sure, income matters a lot. But that's not actually the thing separating people who feel trapped from people who feel calm. The real answer is way less obvious. Your salary only matters relative to the life it silently commits you to maintaining. That's the part almost nobody talks about, because once you see it, you start noticing people making $78,000 who feel rich and people making $317,000 who feel cornered. Think about someone in your life who always seems financially stressed, no matter how much they earn. There's usually a reason hiding underneath the paycheck itself. The first thing you need to understand is that there is no universal correct salary by age. There's only the income required to support your current life without constant financial friction. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, median weekly earnings for full-time workers in the United States were roughly $1,194 in 2025, which annualizes to about $62,088 times. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most people don't compare themselves to the median. They compare themselves to the loudest people online, and that completely distorts reality. If you're 27 making $71,000, you probably feel behind because social media keeps feeding you software engineers posting day-in-my-life videos from luxury apartments in Austin and Miami. But the median salary for workers between 25 and 34 is dramatically lower than what your algorithm suggests. This is what psychologists call availability bias. Your brain assumes whatever it sees most often must also be most common. It's why a few visible high earners can make an entire generation feel poor. Think about the last time someone casually mentioned a salary at dinner. You probably remembered it for days. Now here's the part that will blow your mind. The biggest salary jump in your life usually comes before age 35, but the biggest wealth jump often happens after 40. Vanguard's retirement research found the savings rate and consistency matter more over long periods than maximizing income alone, especially once compound growth had enough time to work. In plain English, the person who quietly invested $600 every month for 20 years often ends up wealthier than the person who earned more but spent like they'd always keep earning more. You've seen this happen. The friend who upgrades apartments every raise. The coworker who finances the luxury SUV 6 months after getting promoted. The couple who starts making more money and somehow gets even more stressed. The boulder just gets heavier. And this is where things get really practical. In your 20s, your salary matters less than your trajectory. That's the real metric. If you're 24 making $48,000 but gaining skills that could realistically double your income over the next decade, You're in a completely different position than someone making $91,000 in a dead-end role they secretly hate. Federal Reserve wage data consistently shows workers who switch industries strategically in their 20s see dramatically higher lifetime earnings than workers who optimize comfort too early. There's a guy named Ronald Reed who proves this better than almost anyone. He was a gas station attendant and later a janitor in Vermont. He wore flannel shirts, drove a used Toyota Yaris, and repaired things instead of replacing them. When he died in 2014, he had quietly accumulated an $8 million investment portfolio. Meanwhile, there are professional athletes who earned more in one season than Ronald Reed made in his entire life and still went broke. Read that again. The difference wasn't intelligence. It wasn't luck. It was the relationship between income and identity. Because in your 20s, you're not just choosing a salary. You're choosing the habits and expectations a salary teaches your brain to normalize. A $3,200 apartment doesn't feel expensive after 6 months. A $740 car payment starts feeling standard. Expensive restaurants become just what people do, and then your lifestyle hardens around you like concrete. But here's something most people completely miss. The salary that changes your life isn't the one that impresses strangers. It's the one that removes recurring beer. For one person, that's $68,000 because they live in a lower-cost city and have no debt. For another person, it's $142,000 because childcare alone costs $1,300 a month. Same country, same age. Totally different realities. According to a 2024 Empower survey, Americans said they needed an average salary of $186,000 to feel financially secure. Not wealthy, secure. But researchers found perceived security kept rising alongside income even after basic needs were covered. That's hedonic adaptation. Your brain quickly turns improvements into expectations. You get the raise. Then your life expands to consume it. You know that feeling. The first time you got a meaningful bump in pay, you probably imagined breathing easier forever. Then 6 months later, your expenses quietly rearrange themselves around the new number, like vines wrapping around a fence. Here's what actually happens. By your early 30s, salary starts becoming less about freedom and more about optionality. Can you leave a toxic job without panic? Can you survive 6 months unemployed? Can you help your parents if something happens? The benchmark shifts from consumption to resilience. According to Fidelity's retirement analysis, households that reached even 1 year of living expenses invested by their mid-30s experienced significantly lower financial stress later in life compared to higher earners with minimal savings. That sounds boring until your company suddenly announces layoffs on a Tuesday morning and half the office starts calculating how long they can survive. Your mortgage sets your floor. Your neighborhood sets your pressure. Your square footage sets your obligations. And once those fixed costs lock in, your salary stops feeling like income and starts feeling pre-assigned. There's a famous contrast between two men from roughly the same era that explains this perfectly. Theodore Johnson worked for UPS. No elite degree, no startup exit. He invested consistently and ended up donating over $70 million to educational causes later in life. Meanwhile, Mike Tyson earned an estimated $400 million across his boxing career and famously faced bankruptcy problems after years of extraordinary spending. Same century, opposite outcomes. And before anyone says, well, obviously Tyson spent too much, that's exactly the point. Most financial problems don't begin with catastrophe. They begin with normalization. One upgrade at a time, one subscription, one nicer apartment, one I deserve this. Now let's talk about something that will probably surprise you. A lot of people hit their emotional peak salary far earlier than expected. Not maximum salary, emotional salary. The point where additional income creates less happiness than additional control over your time. Princeton researchers Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton famously found emotional well-being rose with income up to a certain point before flattening. The later research complicated the exact number, but the direction remained consistent. Beyond a threshold, autonomy matters more than accumulation. You probably know someone who makes less than you expected, but seems weirdly calm all the time. That's not an accident. They might have shorter commutes, lower debt, better relationships, more schedule control. Meanwhile, someone earning twice as much could be checking Slack messages at midnight from an airport terminal while eating a $19 protein bar. The uncomfortable truth is that many high salaries are really stress premiums. Companies aren't just paying for skill, they're paying for urgency, availability, unpredictability, and emotional bandwidth. This took me a long time to internalize because, honestly, I used to think every income increase automatically meant progress. But there's a point where chasing a bigger number starts quietly selling pieces of your life back to your employer one evening at a time. But here's the part nobody talks about. Your salary by age matters far less than your gap by age. The distance between what you earn and what you require. That gap is where your future lives. Thomas Stanley's 40-year research for The Millionaire Next Door found that many high net worth individuals live well below what their income could support. Not because they were cheap, because margin creates power. When your expenses consume 96% of your paycheck, every inconvenience becomes a crisis. When your expenses consume 61%, problems become manageable. That's the difference. And this is where things get really practical. If you're in your 20s, the healthiest target is usually enough income to cover necessities, aggressively build skills, and invest consistently without lifestyle inflation swallowing the gains. For many Americans, that's somewhere between $55,000 and $85,000 depending on location. Not glamorous, but functional. If you're in your 30s, the target shifts. You want enough income that housing stays under control, retirement contributions happen automatically, and emergencies stop feeling existential. In expensive cities, that may require well into six figures. In lower-cost regions, far less. And in your 40s and beyond, the benchmark changes again. The question stops being, what do I earn? And becomes, how much pressure does my life require me to keep earning? That distinction changes everything. Because a teacher with a paid-off home and $840,000 invested may actually possess more practical freedom than a corporate executive earning $340,000 with massive recurring obligations. Now here's the part that will blow your mind. According to Dalbar's annual investor behavior study, average investors consistently underperform the broader market not because they choose terrible investments, but because they panic, chase trends, and interrupt compounding. The average investor becomes their own biggest financial obstacle. Think about that emotionally for a second. The thing hurting most people isn't lack of intelligence, it's instability, fear, comparison, impulse. The same thing happens with salaries. People overspend to look successful, then become financially dependent on maintaining appearances. They buy lives that require continuous maximum effort just to stay upright. The boulder gets bigger. The hill gets steeper. Here's what actually happens. The safest financial position is not earning the most money. It's needing the least from your paycheck to remain stable. That's why some people making $73,000 sleep peacefully while others making $220,000 wake up anxious at 3 a.m. And once you see this, salary benchmarks stop feeling like status symbols and start feeling like engineering problems. How much income does your life structure require? How fragile is your system? How quickly could you adapt if something changed? Those questions matter more than almost any number. I can already hear the obvious pushback. That's easy to say if you already make decent money. And honestly, that's fair. If you're making $39,000 supporting family members while rent keeps climbing, hearing abstract advice about margin can sound ridiculous. But the point isn't to magically optimize your entire financial life overnight. The point is proving to yourself that the direction can change at all. Maybe that starts with $25 automatically invested every Friday. Maybe it's negotiating one bill. Maybe it's learning one marketable skill after work instead of doom scrolling for 2 hours. Small sounds insulting until you realize most financial spirals also started small. One balance, one payment, one normalized habit. You do not need a perfect plan to reduce pressure. You just need one decision that makes next month slightly less fragile than this month, because the deepest shift has almost nothing to do with salary itself. The real transformation happens the moment you stop treating money as evidence of your worth and start treating it as a tool for reducing unnecessary fear. That sounds subtle, but it completely changes the decisions you make. People who chase salary for identity usually never arrive. There's always someone earning more, someone younger, someone posting better screenshots online. But people who chase stability, flexibility, and ownership start noticing something strange. Their lives become quieter, less performative, less panicked, more deliberate. Researchers call this counter-signaling. When people feel genuinely secure, they often feel less need to advertise success outwardly. You can see it everywhere once you notice. The wealthiest person in the room is often wearing the simplest watch. The calmest person at dinner is usually the least interested in proving anything. And that's why the question, what should your salary be by every age, secretly points to a much deeper question. What kind of life are you building that salary to support? Because if your lifestyle constantly expands to consume every raise, you're still pushing the same boulder uphill. It just has leather seats now. The people who eventually feel financially free are rarely the ones who looked richest at 29. They're the ones who built lives flexible enough to survive uncertainty without losing themselves in the process. You're not behind because your salary doesn't match someone else's timeline. You're ahead the moment you stop confusing visible spending with actual stability. The people who quietly gain control of their lives usually look completely ordinary right before everyone finally notices.